Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video. So a few days ago was the 13th Deadman mode tournament, and if you haven't heard, it was a fiasco to say the least. There was a huge game-breaking bug that caused half of the people that got sent to the 1v1 area to die instantly, and on top of that there was a multitude of bugs and issues after that. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about Deadman mode, and if Jagex should continue the Deadman mode tournament, what are they gaining from it, and does it even work as a competitive esport? Just a disclaimer, this is from an outside perspective. I don't play Deadman mode very much, so just keep that in mind. Anyway, hope you enjoy, and let's get started. So as the permadeath stage came to a close and the final players were being decided, everyone in the Lumbridge final area was teleported to the 1v1 area. However, for some reason, that area was covered in fog, and everyone instantly was killed. So after that, they had to pause the tournament and attempt to restore everyone's account. Unfortunately, on death, your account stats get wiped for whatever reason. There's no save state at any point during the tournament. So after a long wait, the best thing that can get decided is everyone will be given 94 base stats and a generic set of gear. This is my favorite part here. Some players in the 1v1 managed to home teleport, so the tournament has to wait for them to be remotely killed. On top of that, players start getting 6-hour logged in the 1v1s because they have been waiting so long for the tournament to continue. In the semi-final fight, Manked Up Mage's opponent is clearly using AHK. There is a clip of his opponent perfectly four-way switching and typing at the same time. The semi-final fight has another issue which requires a rematch, and generally it was just a complete riot. And I don't mean Riot Games, because I think Riot Games is definitely more professional than this. So we can see that after 13 tournaments, Deadman mode is still not stable, and I would not consider this to be even a final product at all. Yet we have still run through 13 Deadman mode tournaments. I do admit that a fair few of the tournaments were bug-free. However, that begs the question, assuming that Deadman mode was completely refined, no actual bugs, does it actually work as a competitive esport? So let's break this down a little bit here. So why are regular conventional sports so popular? Well, to begin with here, people are competitive by nature, and it's fun to watch people who have mastered a certain sport compete against each other. 2, they are extremely simple and easy to understand for the most part. Generally, they operate on getting a ball in a net, getting a puck in a net, getting a ball to the other side of the field, getting the ball in basket. It's all pretty easy to visualize and understand what the end goal is. So now we have esports. Esports are definitely a little bit more complex, but the most popular esports, barring a few, are generally the more simple ones. Stuff like CSGO is really popular because it's pretty easy to understand, and most people already inherently know what it's about. For example, something like Team Deathmatch replicates a real-life scenario of something like a war, 10 people versus 10 people shooting each other. Even stuff like Capture the Flag is pretty easy for people to understand. And that's not to say that more complex esports can't get popular. Someone who first saw a game of League of Legends probably wouldn't understand what's going on, yet still the end game goal is really easy to visualize. Kill your opponent's nexus, kill your opponent's base. The general end game goal is still pretty easy to understand. And the single most important thing that makes for a good competitive esport is rewarding skill above all else.
Players currently that have actually fell in this castle that has normally been absolutely like a formidable defense, but at that clump over there towards the west, there's been at least 6 or 7 people dying there right now.
Now, that's not to say that games can't have elements of luck in them as well. RNG does have its place in competitive game modes. It can be interesting to watch how professional players adapt to these situations, but the game mode should never be more luck-based than skill-based. That seems pretty self-explanatory, but I thought I would say it anyway. Okay, so now comparing this to Deadman mode. Deadman mode is really something completely different, and the concept is extremely cool, and I really like the idea of it. However, unfortunately, the execution just never worked. So if I had to classify Deadman mode, I guess I would classify it as a battle royale. It's kind of really its own thing, but I guess it closest resembles a battle royale currently. You have around 2,000 players that get popped into a giant game map and slowly get funneled to an end area from fog that slowly collapses players inwards, and even in some of the more recent tournaments there are even loot drops on the map. So yeah, no, it's definitely a battle royale. So you might be saying, well, battle royales are really popular right now, and as a competitive mode they are pretty popular as well. Now the big problem for Deadman mode, in my opinion, is just the sheer amount of players. 2,000 players is insane for anyone to try to understand what's going on, including the viewers the shoutcasters, and really the players. That many players is never going to work at a competitive level. For one, it's impossible to moderate, as we can see most of the time. There is going to be rampant rule breaking and cheating throughout the tournament. And one additional issue that most competitive esports don't face is the idea of breaking a Deadman mode rule, but not cheating or breaking a regular game rule in any way. For example, something like boxing or muling, or just things that are generally possible in the game but are technically cheating or breaking the rules. For example, if you took a game like StarCraft, it would be extremely controversial if they just made a rule like, oh, you can't build your nexus here, or this area of the map you're not allowed to build on. Generally, if the content is in the game, then it's fair game to use. So bringing it back to an issue with the permadeath stage, having thousands of players is a nightmare for competitive fairness. These thousands of players are a mix of solo teams, clans, people who have agreements together. Like, there's no way to know if it's a fair fight. So for example, let's compare Deadman mode to Super Smash Bros. So everyone knows the basic 3-platform map on Super Smash Bros. Okay, so instead of a 1v1, now you have 30 people crammed on that shitty map, and on top of that, you have every fucking item on the entire game. What do you end up with? Pretty much a clusterfuck where it comes down to complete chance who actually wins. And in my mind, that's how I see the Deadman mode permadeath stage. Okay, so now moving on to the 1v1 stage. It actually was increased this year, or the last Deadman mode, to 256 contestants, which granted I do understand why Jagex did this. The 1v1 stage is really the only competitive part of the tournament, where for the most part your skill will directly result in you winning. However, that is not entirely true, because depending on how long you've played and how lucky you got throughout the tournament, you could be at a massive advantage over your opponents just from having higher stats, better gear and whatnot. And that is another issue, but let's leave that for now. From a competitive and gameplay perspective, it does make sense to have more 1v1s as opposed to permadeath time. However, from a viewing perspective, it's pretty challenging, as the first round will have 128 matches fought, the next one will have 64, then 32, and generally competitive brackets and other esports kind of cap out at 32, maybe 64. But this whole Deadman mode tournament is attempting to condense like months of matches in other esports into one 5 or 6 hour live stream. So the 1v1 stage tends to drag on quite a bit. Easily my favorite part of the tournament is watching like the final 32, and the reason why is probably because it finally falls in line with how other competitive events are structured. And that kind of brings me into the final point. Should Deadman mode continue? Well, I'm going to give it a straight up no if they can't produce a stable and bug-free tournament, even if the exposure and membership revenue is more than the amount of money they're using to produce it, which I'm sure it could be, but it's frankly a little bit embarrassing to see these tournaments go so tits up every time. Now, assuming a smooth and bug-free experience, I think if they are genuinely attempting to market it as a competitive esport along the likes of StarCraft, League of Legends, CSGO, Apex Legends, whatever, they would have to make some serious changes, in my opinion, generally to the permadeath stage. Okay, so here would be my suggestion. Again, take it with a grain of salt. First up, I think there should be less players. Even if there was maybe 1,000 players, like, I think reducing it will just help overall with stability, moderation, whatnot. I don't think there's a need to be 2,000 players. I understand they want to be inclusive and have it so that anyone could potentially win, but I think narrowing the scope a little bit would probably help out in general. Now from there, we need to reduce the player counts down to 256. Now I don't have a suggestion for that yet because there's so many different options. However, in my opinion, I think the top 256 players should move on to the permadeath stage. In my vision, each individual person would then be teleported to a random location on a condensed version of the permadeath map. All your stats would be the same, all the items you would have would be the same, and then we'd move on with the permadeath stage. Everyone would be in a random location. The fog would be crunching everyone down into one last area. Everyone would start in a random location, which would kind of help combat clans, obviously not entirely. They would potentially meet up, but all their members would be dispersed. They would potentially get attacked on the way, some of them would die, and ideally they would keep the end area a secret until the fog slowly closed everyone in together. I think again that would hurt clans, as you wouldn't be able to camp a certain area the entire time. Okay, so once the fog moves in, players fight, players get killed by the fog, players get killed by other players, the player count gets reduced to something like maybe 32 or even 64, but I think less would be better. Only then does everyone get teleported to the 1v1 stage. So then in the 1v1 stage, we have way less players to deal with. The official live stream can focus in on each fight individually, and maybe once you get down to the top 16 or top 8, we watch them one at a time, and they go in succession. My only main issue with the 1v1 is you feel like you're missing a lot because there are so many fights going on at the same time. There could be popular players having to fight at the same time and you wouldn't really know it, and there's just too much information to take in, so I think having a smaller size would help with that a lot. Again, just my opinion. I don't play Deadman mode that much. I do play other competitive games, not competitively by any means. I understand this is just an ideal scenario for me. This may not work with the engine. There may be some PvP mechanics I'm missing, or that could affect the game mode in a completely different way. Just an idea. So to conclude, I think they need to fix the game bug-wise, or they should just stop doing it. And if they do manage to fix that, they should make some major changes to make it more competitively viable and try to follow some of the more traditional competitive rules in the future. Anyway guys, that is it for the video. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my ramble. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.